Hey everyone, Happy New Year. As you can see, this is longer than pretty much any other video I've made by far, and I really just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for not just watching this video, but really any other one of my silly uploads. I really, truly mean it. It doesn't matter to me if I never gain any significant traction, just as long as one person hears me and my goofy little opinions out, that's all that matters. With that being said, welcome to my magnum opus. Until my inevitable multi-hour Final Fantasy VIII retrospective that'll come out in, like, I don't know, 4 fucking years, but hey, who cares about that? Anyway, this is a video about 4.5 years in the making. Let me start from the beginning. About halfway through 2019, I watched Schaeferless Productions' ranking of every Best Picture nominee, and for some reason, it kind of inspired me to do my own ranking of sorts. So, as I had to record and rank all the games that I'd beaten so far that year, since I already had a few under my belt. I wanted to make a video at the end of the year ranking them all, but that never came to fruition since I didn't really have any real editing software at the time besides iMovie. Same story with 2021 and 2022. I actually wrote quite a few failed scripts that will never see the light of day, containing probably outdated opinions anyway, but this year, things are different, because I now have an established YouTube channel, baby! And honestly, I'm kinda glad I waited this long to do it, because having 5 years worth of games is a hell of a lot cooler than just 1 or 2 years. Now how many is 5 years worth, you may ask? Well, 113. Yeah, I've got my work cut out for me today, huh? Well, no turning back now, I suppose. I gotta lay out some ground rules, though, really quickly. In order for a game to be added to the count, I obviously need to have reached a completion status, but that may be a bit vague, so I'll put it this way. If I reached the intended ending for completion, that game qualifies. If I didn't achieve a normal or true ending that maybe locks me out of content like the intended final boss, that does not qualify, with a few exceptions. Also, if I abuse save states or rewind very heavily, that don't count. I didn't really beat the game with the intended experience at all, with some exceptions. So just because I technically finished Contra 3, I still don't count it because it wasn't my own consistent skill that really got me there. Now, if a game doesn't have an ending or is meant to be played over and over again, I make my own win conditions. For example, winning a serious round of it, or playing it until I feel a basic enough understanding of the game. 2 more things. It must be a game I beat for the first time in that 5-year period, starting with January 1st, 2019, and ending today, December 31st, 2023, assuming I actually get it uploaded by then. Nothing I beat before, even if it's been like 10 years since the last time I played it. And lastly, it doesn't matter when I started the game, it only matters when I ended it. If I started it 15 years ago and only ended it this year, that still counts. Alright, now that that's out of the way, I should mention that it's been a while since I played a lot of these games, especially the ones from 2019, and my opinions on them may very well be outdated by this point. Still, I've tried to structure this in a way that I feel most satisfied with, and I really don't think I'll have any massive regrets that I can't just address in a pinned comment later, assuming any of my opinions change drastically. But with that being said, it's time to hit the road, starting from the bottom with one of, if not the worst video game I've ever played, and working our way up to the top with one of my top 5 favorite games of all time. Let's begin with number 113, Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis. First of all, let me make something clear. I'm referring to Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis for the Game Boy Advance, released in 2006, not Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis, released in 1991. I'm sure many of you already know the infamous reputation of this port, but for those of you who are unaware, might be thinking, wait, what? I mean, yeah, Sonic 1 hasn't aged super gracefully or anything, but there's no way a port of it could be a contender for the worst video game you've ever played. I think you can easily sum this game up in 2 words. What happened? How did a basic port of a Genesis game on a system that has already received ports of Genesis games that aren't that bad go this horribly wrong? I mean, I know Sonic Team was pretty much the worst place to work at in the mid-2000s due to Sega's awful management, but like, this is on a whole nother level of zero quality control. And here's the thing, I don't even hate Sonic 1. I mean, yeah, it's aged kinda poorly in some aspects, but I still think it's a pretty fine game overall. Like, I don't even think Labyrinth is that bad in the original, but in Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis, it's the worst video game level I've ever played in my entire life. I will never, ever understand how Sonic fans will continue to throw around the most basic bitch answers when talking about the worst Sonic games like 06 or Secret Rings or Forces, when this is right there! The only two I see even competing with it for that award on this level are a game that doesn't even function properly and a game that barely even counts as a video game. I'd say Sonic Team should be ashamed, but they actually are. This port doesn't even have any credits. Even the devs knew what a steaming pile of shit this was. Not only the worst port of a game I've ever played, but more than likely the worst video game I've ever played, period! Well, that's the worst of this list, at least. And hey, the good news is, there's no other game anywhere near that bad. That's our only F tier. Let's move up to the still bad, but not quite as bad E tier. Number 111 and 112, Mega Man X6 and Mega Man X7. I really don't have it in me to rank these two separately, because if I'm being honest, they're both pretty equally bad in my opinion, but for different reasons, interestingly. X6 is a frustrating, broken mess with so many horribly implemented mechanics and ideas that it all comes crashing down on itself so hard in a glorious blaze of fire. X7, on the other hand, is a boring, painful, unpolished slog where even just saving your game takes an eternity, and X is butchered beyond recognition. Seriously, why the fuck is he just sitting on the couch doing nothing, being a whiny asshole? So it's a real pick your poison type scenario. Number 110, Panzer Dragoon Mini. Spoiler alert for later in the list, but we're gonna see some absolute banger Panzer Dragoon games as we get closer to the top. And none of those games will be Panzer Dragoon Mini. I mean, what did I expect? It was literally made for babies. I have so little to say here. It's a supremely boring game with almost nothing going on that you could easily beat in like half an hour flat. And that half hour certainly felt like an eternity to me, though. It's absolutely not the type of game you play out of genuine interest. You play this to say you've beaten every Panzer Dragoon game and nothing more. Okay, D tier time, the last of the truly bad games. And yeah, these games are still bad, but like, I can still get enjoyment out of them, and they're not quite unplayably bad. With that being said, yeah, they're still bad. Starting with number 109, Shadow the Hedgehog. Let me preface this by saying that Shadow the Hedgehog is my second favorite video game character ever. So you can't call me a grumpy boomer Sonic fan who thinks the series should have never gone 3D and robotics should have never been renamed to Eggman for ranking it this low. But yeah, this game is just terrible. It's not devoid of good qualities. I like the music and some of the paths can be decently fun, but between the bad controls, level design, mission design, story, and the butchering of Shadow's character that unfortunately turned him into the laughingstock he is today, I can't bring myself to not hate this game. Number 108, Donkey Kong 1981. It's Donkey Kong. It's a 1981 video game. It feels cruel ranking this so low because of its legacy, but I really feel like there were better games in the arcade even when this one released, like Pac-Man. Number 107, Nekopara Volume 1. I'm not a fan of visual novels, and Nekopara really didn't do anything to change that. If anything, it just made me feel really weird by the end, and this is coming from a huge weeb, mind you. Number 106, Dragon Quest II, Luminaries of the Legendary Line. Alright, we finally moved up to the C tier, which means everything here is either just okay or fairly mediocre, and Dragon Quest II sure is mediocre. I think it's impressive that I don't believe there's truly a single bad Dragon Quest game, mainline anyway, but this one sure pushes that boundary. It's pretty much the first Dragon Quest game, but with more party members, enemies, locations, higher difficulty, all spread across a campaign 3 times longer. I felt so unbelievably bored by the end, but at least it never got too painful. Number 105, Metroid. So back at the beginning of COVID lockdown, I had a crazy idea to try and beat an archaic NES game with no save states. My game of choice was Metroid, and to my surprise, I not only pulled it off, but never got frustrated and even found it a little cathartic. I don't think those results can be recreated today though, since any attempts to replay it now just end in me getting bored and annoyed. Trust me though, there will be more Metroid on this list, just you wait. Number 104, Mario Kart Live Home Circuit. This probably wasn't made for me, or at least current me. My brother did get a lot of enjoyment out of it, so I'm glad it wasn't a waste of money, but I can't say I was too impressed. Younger me would have loved it though. Number 103, Super Mario Kart. I don't see any reason to go back to this one unless you grew up with it, or you're marathoning every Mario Kart game like I attempted to. I'm sure it can be fun with a friend, but the single-player experience here is absolutely abysmal. Number 102, Spice and Wolf VR. This probably could have been B tier if not for one thing, the price to performance ratio. What I mean by that is that this game has nowhere near $25 worth of content, not even close. Granted, as a huge Spice and Wolf fan, I enjoyed what was there. It's basically an episode of the show with an interactable holo minigame. I experienced it all in less than an hour and refunded it, though. Only get this one if it goes on sale for less than $10. Number 101, Sonic Advance 2. With all due respect to Advance 2 fans, I don't get the hype. The soundtrack is pretty stellar for a GBA game, and I like the bosses, but man, the level design just does not work for this game. Sonic has always had a problem with going too fast to react to incoming obstacles, and this is that at its worst. And that's not even getting into the emerald collecting, which is easily the worst in the series, no question. Number 100, Metal Gear. I think this is worth at least one playthrough for any Metal Gear fan, but don't expect it to blow you away if you haven't played it yet. It's on a very similar to that of Zelda 1, which means it's best experienced with a guide, but I'd actually say it's a little better than Zelda 1. Number 99, Sonic Frontiers: The Final Horizon. Oh boy, I really don't know how to feel about this DLC. It defied my expectations so hard in both a great and terrible way. There's a lot I genuinely love about it, and oh, so much I hate about it. For example, hot take, I actually think I like the final boss of this less than the base game final boss from a gameplay perspective. The Final Horizons is so insanely inconsistent to the point where I'd say it feels like both the pinnacle of Frontiers and the most painful thing ever, sometimes simultaneously. That fucking boss rush, man! Now, I'll talk a bit about Vanilla Frontiers later, don't worry, but just know that this made me want to never touch the game ever again. But I also can't say it was a worthless experience. Number 98, Metroid Other M. Oh, Other M, Other M. In 2020, I chose to dive headfirst into the Metroid series, and I fell in love instantly, and it's now my favorite game series of all time. But there's no escaping Other M. I actually think it starts off fairly strong, but damn, it falls off so hard throughout the course of its runtime that I felt nothing but the most empty, hollow feeling by the time I beat it. Number 97, Mega Man X5. This is obviously nowhere near as bad as X6 or X7, but it's undoubtedly where the X series really started to fall off in quality. It's a real shame too, since the first four were absolute classics. I haven't played X8 yet, but hopefully if X9 ever happens, it's at least on the same level of quality as Mega Man 11. Number 96, Dragon Quest III: The Seeds of Salvation. This is a bit of a weird one, because I kind of feel like I'm actually the one at fault here for not enjoying it. I can't really explain why I didn't enjoy Dragon Quest III very much, because, to jump ahead a little bit, I actually kind of like Dragon Quest I. Maybe I had a bad team comp, or I didn't understand the mechanics fully, but my overall impression of this game is that it's simply too big and ambitious for its own good. There are genuinely some good moments sprinkled throughout, and there's lots of fan service that makes it worth playing after you beat the first two games, but I can't help but look back at Dragon Quest III and only think of the high encounter rate, brutal difficulty, and the insane amount of grinding I had to do. I wanted to like this game like everyone else does. I even bought the Game Boy Color version thinking I'd play it to death, but I guess I'm truly the odd one out here. Maybe I'll give it another go when the HD 2D version comes out though. And now we've reached the B tier. These aren't the best of the best, but everything here is at least good. Starting with number 95, Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes. Yes, this is a $40 demo. We're all aware of that by now. But once you look past that though, this is a pretty solid, nearly 2-hour-long mission that sets up directly into Phantom Pain, a game I've yet to beat. Number 94, Dragon Quest. I really don't know how I actually enjoyed my time with Dragon Quest 1, because here's the thing, this game is dead simple. There are exactly 3 story elements total. Defeat the Fiend Lord, rescue the princess who instantly falls in love with you, and prove you're the descendant of the legendary hero Erdrick. Name a better power fantasy than that. There's nothing but the raw basics in terms of turn-based RPG mechanics here, because, after all, this is the granddaddy of JRPGs, and if you can maybe get in the right mindset to enjoy this for what it is, I really think it makes for a comfortable trip down a very basic but welcoming road, and I think all that works because of the 5-hour length, at least in the remake. I don't often find myself replaying RPGs, but I can really see myself going back to this one because of that short length. So yeah, if you're a fan of JRPGs and haven't tried this one, maybe give it a shot. You really don't have anything to lose. Just keep your expectations in check, of course. Number 93, Florence. I really wish there was more to this game. All that I could think of when I finished it was, wait, that's it? But I want to see more of it. I love slice of life, and this is that at its most pure. I really hope the developers make another game like it in the future. Number 92, The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. This was a cute April Fool's joke, a very elaborate one at that. Honestly, I had a good time with this one. Getting to see a lot of the gang together again in a mostly casual setting, just being themselves, and I'm all for that kind of chemistry. But, where's Silver? Number 91, Streets of Kamurocho. This is just a Streets of Rage 2 demo with a Yakuza coat of paint, but you know what? It was free, and I really like Streets of Rage 2, so I'll let it pass. Number 90, Super Hot VR. No way, a game that actually makes me feel like I'm in the Matrix. One of my biggest problems with VR games, including this one, is a lack of content, but the core game structure is built on such a rock-solid foundation that I can't really knock too much against it. Number 89, New Super Luigi U. This is another weird one. I don't actually feel like I beat it since I accidentally took numerous secret exits that gave me a straight line to the finish, but I really don't have it in me to try again, so oh well. Number 88, Super Mario Bros. Yes, Super Mario Bros. Is unironically on this list. I played this as early back as I want to say 2008, and it really took me 15 years just to beat it. Oh my god, am I that bad at video games? I'll just say this. I think it actually holds up pretty well, all things considered. Not like the absolute best Mario game by any means, not even close, but you know what? I could see myself going back and maybe playing it every once in a while. Number 87, Helltaker. Another short but really solid game built on a good foundation, and since it's completely free, I actually don't have anything negative to say about it. Of course, I love all the demons and their cartoonishly over-the-top personality traits too, my favorite of which probably being Azazel. She's an absolute cinnamon roll, love her. Number 86, Persona 3 FES. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I love everything about this game except the actual gameplay itself. It nails everything from the story, to the music, to the cast, to the atmosphere, and just so much else. In fact, I'm just gonna say right now, this actually has my favorite soundtrack of any Persona game. Yeah, Fight Me 5 fans. However, it kind of fumbles just hard enough on some very important things. Things that I'm sure we'll know about be fixed in the upcoming remake, which I am very excited for, even if it leeches a little too heavily from P5 style and lacks the Fez and portable content, so it's kind of a monkey's paws situation, but hey, I'm glad we're getting the remake at all, I guess. Oh boy, number 85, Sonic Frontiers. I have a lot to say about the base game of Sonic Frontiers, but I'll try to keep this brief. With enough refinement, I really think this style could lead to some of the best 3D Sonic games of all time. The open zone format has so much potential, they just need to nail it properly. What the fuck did I mean by that? I'm actually pretty glad Sonic Team says they want to stick with open zone gameplay going forward, and it's actually kind of weird seeing Sonic fans agree that, yeah, it is a good direction to take the series, instead of just being divisive as usual. Kind of night and day compared to Zelda fans right now, who could not be less happy about the open world format for Zelda games. I mean, they're wrong, but that's a story for later. It's just too bad that Sonic Team didn't quite hit the ground running on their first try. I mean, I didn't really expect them to, but damn, Sonic Frontiers just has quite a few glaring flaws, without a doubt. But you know what? It's kind of uplifting to see a confident and bright future for 3D Sonic for the first time in like a decade, and you better believe that I'll be there for the next game no matter what happens. Well, that would all be the case if this fucking DLC didn't exist, which has now left me terrified for the future of Sonic in this gameplay style. Hey, at least the soundtrack is one of the best of any game on this list, period. Seriously, how did this not get nominated for Best Soundtrack at the Game Awards? Hell, why did God of War win over Xenoblade 3 and Elden Ring? Are the judges really that pretentious? Number 84, Among Us.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, ladies.
Having a drink with the girls? That sounds quite nice.
Among Us.
Number 83, Mario Party Superstars. I'm just gonna say this. How has this game not gotten DLC yet? Because it finally happened! We finally got another good Mario Party game! I mean, granted, it's just based on old Mario Parties, but, I mean, hey, something is better than nothing! Number 82, Fire Emblem Fates Revelations. Nope, I'm skipping this one. I don't want to talk about it, and if you know anything about this game or its reputation, you know why. I could defend this game for its gameplay, which is actually good. You're stupid if you think Fates does not have actually good gameplay, but even I have to agree that this story is just atrocious. It might legit be the worst story of any game on this list. Number 81, Castlevania. Even in spite of some very dated design choices, I still really like the original Castlevania. I think the levels are extremely satisfying to nail down a perfect playthrough of. With that being said, though, some of the dated aspects, like the controls in particular, are genuinely tough to go back to. So if you aren't used to games like this, maybe try the easy mode exclusive to the Japanese version before you dive into the regular version. Number 80, Danganronpa. Oh boy, this is gonna be an interesting one. I actually kinda liked the first Danganronpa, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I mean, I actually wouldn't have played it at all had my ex not convinced me to, but you know what? I'm kinda glad I did. I don't really care for visual novels still, but this one really did have me hooked. The trials in particular are absolutely a highlight. I felt so much goddamn stress playing them, and it all felt worth it. Sentiments on the sequels seem to be all over the place, but I do genuinely plan to try them one day. Number 79, Metroid 2, Return of Samus. Now, this might seem abnormally high, but hear me out. When I first tried Metroid 2, I fucking hated it. It was the worst in the series to me, and I didn't even bother finishing it. But upon trying it again, I realized that I was absolutely wrong. This isn't the best Metroid game by any means, but it is, to me, the most underrated. I can't even really explain what works so well for me with it. It's just one of those cases of an incredibly simple game that works so well for what it is. Maybe the bosses could be better, and the controls are still janky, and there's no map, but in the end, I liked Metroid 2 a lot more than I thought I would. Of course, that's not the best version of the game, but we'll get to that one in due time, don't you worry. Number 78, Astro's Playroom. The PS5 has no games. Except for this one, and it's pretty novel. This is basically a playable PlayStation museum, and if you've been a fan of them since the first system, this will be a real treat. I've only been playing PlayStation consoles for about 5 years now, aside from the Vita, which I didn't even really use until 2019 anyway, but I still loved seeing a lot of the references here. It's a pretty cool tech demo, and I'd love to see Nintendo or Xbox or hell, even Sega do something like this one day. Number 77, Far Cry 3. I really need to go back and replay this at some point, but on PC instead of the shitty Xbox One port. I'm no Ubisoft fan, I will never confess to be. I mean, I like the modern 2D Rayman games, and I played that one Assassin's Creed on the Vita, but I really missed out on most of their beloved entries. Having actually played the game that would become the blueprint for every copy and pasted Far Cry game, though, I can say that it was pretty good. I can definitely see the hype behind it. It's not my favorite open world game out there, of course, not by a mile, but it's gotta be better than most these days, even within the same series. Number 76, Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. I gotta be honest, I actually kind of enjoyed this one a little more than regular 3. I don't know if it's the higher intensity action or the more comedic tone, because goddamn is this game hilarious. But I came out of this one even more satisfied. It's a damn shame it ended up being the last supposedly truly great Far Cry game. But I hear the others are okay, just not quite on the same level. I'm definitely gonna play 2 at some point, and I'm open to trying 4 and 6, but I don't really know when that will be. Number 75, Sonic Origins. This could have and honestly should have been S tier, but yeah, they needed more time to cook without a doubt. These are still great games at the end of the day, and haven't been butchered too hard, but it's hard not to feel like this was a very rushed project, lacking a lot of polish. Even Stealth himself was really unpleased with how the port of 3 turned out. I'd say as a whole it's better than Mario 3D All-Stars, but not by much. I can definitely say both collections are extremely overpriced, though. Like, seriously, this feels like a slap in the face. I also didn't buy the Plus upgrade because it just doesn't seem worth it unless you're a soulless slave to the Sonic brand who must consume everything related to Sonic. Again, these are great games, there's no denying that. Hence why I didn't rank this collection in C tier, but it's really up to you if it's worth the price of admission. I personally don't think so, but you know what, your mileage may vary. Man, I've been pretty critical of Sonic in this video, which sucks because it's one of my favorite game franchises. So you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and shout out my friend Nat real quickly. She made a Sonic fan game that was featured in Sage, and her favorite game of all time is Sonic Frontiers. She also writes this one Sonic fan fiction called Sonic Runaways. Sorry Nat that I was so critical of Sonic in this video. Honest mistake, it absolutely will happen again in the future. Number 74, Gato Robato. Why did I pronounce it like that? Cat Metroidvania, very cute. There isn't a whole lot going on here, but even in a genre as large as Metroidvania, this one stands out just enough to be worth a playthrough, maybe even a 100% playthrough. Okay, what game is next? Oh god. Number 73, Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. This is gonna be a complicated one. Metal Gear Solid 4 is truly all over the place. It can be so great at times, and yet so baffling at other times. This is particularly true for the story, which is, depending on how you look at it, either a narrative masterpiece or a narrative disaster, and there's so much story, there's so much going on here that it barely even feels like a game sometimes. I know people make a big deal about modern PlayStation games being too cinematic, but this is literally 3/4 just cutscenes! The gameplay itself also feels weirdly mixed in much the same way. It's got some perfect highs, but some boring-ass lows. If you want a really good deep dive into this game, though, I'd highly recommend watching either Metal Gear Solid 4 Was a Mistake, or Metal Gear Solid 4 is pretty solid. But at the end of the day, I can't bring myself to hate this game, though. In fact, let me talk about the ending for a second. The ending to Metal Gear Solid 4 is my second favorite ending, just behind Metal Gear Solid 3. Not just second favorite Metal Gear ending, mind you. Second favorite ending of any video game, period. It's so batshit insane that it honestly wraps back around to being incredible. But most importantly, it provides what I consider the perfect closure to Solid Snake as a character. Number 72, Panzer Dragoon Remake. I love the original Panzer Dragoon a lot. It's an absolute classic that spawned one of my favorite Sega franchises of all time. I was already well acquainted with the series in 2019 thanks to Orta, so when a remake of the first game was announced, I lost my shit so hard. Fast forward to release and even after some patches that fixed up a few things and added some content/features that really should have been in the base game, I definitely prefer the original. I don't want to say it's soulless or anything, I'm sure the devs cared, and I'd love to see them get the chance to work on Zwei as well, but something just feels missing here. The visuals are pretty cheap, like, you can definitely tell that this was made to be a Switch launch exclusive, and the rearranged soundtrack is, much worse than the original, and it feels a lot easier barring a really weird difficulty spike on stage 6. Heck, I can't even really say there's much in the way of improvements outside of a higher frame rate since the controls really don't feel that much better than before. But, in spite of all that, it's still the same great game at heart, just with a bit of the charm sucked out. I'd say it's better than the Secret of Mana remake, but not quite as good as the Trials of Mana remake. Number 71, Metroid Prime 2, Echoes. This actually used to be my favorite game in the Prime trilogy, but for reasons that I'll explain later, that's no longer the case. Hey, at least second place is still pretty good. I didn't actually beat Prime 3, and that's why it's not on this list. I think I was a little bit fatigued from Metroid when I beat Prime 2, so there's a chance I didn't really get the ideal experience, but hey, if Nintendo wants to greenlight that Prime 2 remaster, I'd be down to try it again. Prime 2, though, is a fun game with a lot of improvements over the first. It just may be a bit too big and slow sometimes. I don't know, out of all the Metroid games I've beaten, I don't really feel like I have that much to say about this one. It's just pretty solid, but not much else to say, really. I've noticed it tends to be a love it or hate it game, with some calling it either the best in the series, while some could not care less. Am I in the middle, technically? I don't know, the multiplayer is decent, I guess. Number 70, Nier Replicant. I think I need to give Nier Replicant another chance, or at the very least, go for the other endings, because yes, I only went for ending A. I felt too fatigued to go for the others. I will just say up in front that this has one of the best soundtracks and stories I've ever experienced in any video game, period. The story in particular pulls no punches, making you feel downright miserable. So many characters, both insignificant and significant, die, and they know how to make you feel it. And the soundtrack, oh my god, the soundtrack goes hard. I'd have to say my favorite soundtrack would probably be Song of the Ancients, but I can't even say that confidently without another banger track crossing my mind. In spite of those two phenomenal things, though, I've really felt the length of this game even at just 20 hours. The combat is pretty alright, but the gameplay loop got repetitive pretty quickly. It's not particularly challenging either, so I was never really kept on my toes. There are great moments to be had for sure, but I was just a tad disappointed by this one, at least on my first playthrough. Now, this could change though, because there is another game on this list that I initially found to be repetitive and a little boring at times, but grew to love upon revisiting. But we'll get to that one later. Number 69, Grease. Grease is simple, beautiful, and emotionally charged. Now, admittedly, I've never felt the full effects of the stages of grief, but I could still feel the emotional impact of it all. It's very clearly a personal story, and I have infinite respect to the creator for that. Number 68, Beat Saber. Of all the VR games I've played, Beat Saber is probably my favorite. It's just really fun, what more can I say? That's actually all I kinda have to say about it now, come to think about it. I'm not the best at rhythm games, if I'm being real. Number 67, Metal Gear Solid. Oh boy, the game that got me into Metal Gear, of course. This game has definitely aged in a few places, namely those stinky-ass visuals. There are also issues with the controls feeling pretty stiff, bosses being not great for the most part, and a large amount of backtracking, but man, as an experience, Metal Gear Solid is just unforgettable, with plenty of iconic moments in both gameplay and story. In fact, let me just get this out of the way. Metal Gear Solid might just have my favorite narrative of any video game I've ever played, second only to another game on this list. It helps that the voice acting is pretty good, even by modern standards, and top tier by 90s standards. I'm really excited that more people can finally experience this on consoles again, because it's a game that every gamer should try at least once in their life. Alright, and with that, we've reached the A tier. Yes, more than half of this list is A tier games. We're going from games I consider good but flawed to games I consider downright great or even amazing. Starting with number 66, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. Woo! Nano Machine son! Actually, I think the memes kinda got oversaturated during the game's resurgence of popularity in 2022. Oh well, still a great game that refuses to die for a reason though. Be it the lightning-fast, fun combat, goofy yet endearing writing, and bangin' soundtrack, it's a good time. Some of the levels, I will say, start to get repetitive, and not every boss is fun, so I can't quite say it's as good as many others make it out to be, but I still find myself booting it up now and then to just replay a boss or two. Also, this was actually the first Metal Gear game I ever beat. MGS1 was still the first one I played, with that being somewhere at the end of 2018, but I didn't finish it for months due to my copy of Disc 2 being way too scratched for the console to read, leaving this one to be the first one that I beat, somewhere in early 2019. In fact, it might actually be the first one on this entire list that I beat. Number 65, the Henry Stickmin Collection. Now this brings back some nostalgia. Like many others, I grew up playing the Henry Stickmin games on Flash. So this was a treat to finally get to play. It doesn't go beyond the scope of the originals or blow your mind to an insane degree, but it's an effective finale to the series that feels 100% earned. Number 64, Tekken 7. Full disclosure, I'm not good at fighting games, and that definitely includes Tekken 7, but I still really like this game. I didn't boot it up often, but I played through the story mode and played some matches with a friend, so I think I got enough experience. For some reason, I really wanted to get good at this game and thought I'd end up dedicating a lot of time to it, yet not even close. I guess my two mains are probably Noctis and Kunimitsu in particular, but I came nowhere near close to trying every character. This isn't actually the only Tekken experience I have, though, as I've actually had Tekken 3 ever since getting my PS1, and I've yet to beat the arcade mode on that or anything. I do enjoy that game as well, though. Maybe it'll show up on another list again one day, who knows. Number 63, Deltarune Chapter 2. I obviously don't think we've seen the peak of the Deltarune project yet, neither do I think it's reached the peak of Undertale at its best, but I actually have no doubts it'll get there eventually with what I consider to be a superior battle system and whatnot. Looking forward to Chapter 3 and whatever wacky stuff it brings with it. Number 62, Stray. I'd probably rated this one higher than most would. I mean, it's just a short game where you play as a cat with some puzzle solving and very light action. Now, it could be just because I love cats, but to me, Stray is nothing short of charming from start to finish. It's not the pinnacle of storytelling, and its puzzles aren't the most complex, but I think a game this light can be effective in between many heavy hitters. In fact, the ending genuinely made me tear up, not only when I reached it, but anytime I'd think about it for a while after beating it. Shocking, I know. I do think it getting nominated for Game of the Year was a bit overly generous, but I'm not upset about it either, of course. Number 61, Osu. Now here's a rabbit hole I didn't expect to fall down. I have had a crazy amount of fun with Osu, and I still play it to this day. Normally I kind of enjoy rhythm games, but they don't hook me in anywhere near this much. OSU is just different, I guess. I constantly find myself trying new songs and brushing up my skills on old ones I'd already tried, and it never really got tiring. The thing that absolutely elevates this so high, though, is how easy it is to play community-made beat maps. Now I can click away to my favorite anime OPs, video game songs, and, Weezer with ease. Thanks, Osu. Number 60, Mario Kart Double Dash. So, I only really grew up with about half the Mario Kart series, Wii, 64, 7, and 8. It wasn't until recently that I wanted to go back and check out the others, and yeah, I can say that I get why Double Dash remains so beloved. Unique controls and mechanics and solid tracks to race on make it my favorite of the first half of the series by far. That said, I do still kinda prefer each subsequent game for one reason or another. DS and 8 have more content, and I like Wii and 7's track selection more. That said, it's still more than worth going back to, whether alone or especially with friends. Number 59, Demon's Crest. Demon's Crest probably isn't as popular or difficult as its older brother Ghosts and Goblins, but I can say that I enjoyed it a lot more than any G&G game I've tried yet. Trust me. This is just a really solid SNES classic I don't hear enough talking about, which is criminal considering how fun it is from start to finish, only having one or two genuinely bad moments. If you have the Switch Online membership, absolutely try this out in the SNES catalog when you can. Number 58, Uncharted Drake's Fortune. Uncharted 1 has aged pretty badly in a lot of ways, and I still loved it. What can I say, it's just dumb action movie fun through and through. Number 57, Metroid Samus Returns. If Metroid 2 isn't the most underrated Metroid game, then this absolutely is. I know that I like this game more than most, and yeah, it's got some problems, but I just love 2D Metroid too much to not like this one a bunch as well, especially with those bosses with easily the best Ridley fight in the entire series. It is definitely outclassed by the other two games closely related to it, but I'll touch on those games when we get to the S tier. Number 56, Panzer Dragoon 2 Zwei. I think that's how it's pronounced. This is an impressive sequel without a doubt. Visually, it's an upgrade with a way more detailed level environments and a much higher frame rate, plus a considerable amount of spectacle leaving me engaged just by looking at it. I mean, hell, it's even got a full widescreen mode. That's pretty cool, right? But when it comes to the 3 mainline Panzer Dragoon games, I think this one is kind of my least favorite, obviously excluding Remake of 1. It loses a lot of the difficulty that made the first game really special in favor of an easier, more flashy experience. Now, that's not to say it was too easy. I did definitely die a few times, but compared to Panzer Dragoon 1, which took me multiple sessions to actually complete, I beat this all in one sitting, only really stopping briefly to pick up my brother from school. And this is something that can't even be fixed with the hard mode because, there is no hard mode. I mean, Panzer Dragoon Mini has a hard mode. What's this game's excuse? This kind of leads to the game's biggest deal breaker, the short length. Now, because of the difficulty in Panzer Dragoon 1, the fact that you could beat it in about an hour wasn't really much of an issue. You'd be spending a lot of that time restarting and trying to get back to where you got a game over on. But here, it actually ends right after my favorite stage in the game when I was clamoring for more. Even just 1 or 2 extra levels really would have gone a long way. Now, it may seem like I'm starting to hate this game, but I actually still think it was incredibly fun. It's more the same rail shooting goodness, just a bit tamer. It's definitely my least favorite of the trilogy, but when the worst is this great, I'll gladly take it. Number 55, Mario Kart DS. Yes, the third to last Mario Kart game I'd yet to play, and damn what a banger game it is. I mean, yeah, sure, it's got some pretty mid-retro tracks, but it has some top-tier nitro tracks for sure. I mean, shit, you got Waluigi Pinball, of course, but there's also Tick-Tock Clock, Bowser's Castle, Rainbow Road, Airship Fortress, Peach Gardens, Daisy... Wait, no, there's no Daisy level in this game. What the fuck am I saying? Delfino Square, Wario Stadium, Figure 8, maybe not that one. I mean, that's not even getting into mission mode, which I've actually barely touched. I mean, I will definitely go back and finish it someday, but I've only dipped my toes into that so far. I think Mario Kart DS is really just impossible to hate, and I didn't even grow up with it at all. Definitely one I've found myself coming back to as well, just for fun here and there. Number 54, Bowser's Fury. Please, Nintendo, when you've released the hopefully much more powerful successor to the Switch, let this be the template for the next 3D Mario game. It has so much potential, and they managed to knock it out of the park with just a mere proof of concept. Legit, the only bad thing about Bowser's Fury is that it only lasts 4 hours max. It's so cool having a pseudo-open-world Mario game where it feels like everything is connected with platforming challenges thrown in between. I know 2D Mario is currently having its moment to shine in the spotlight again, but when 3D Mario comes back, I hope this is the style that returns along with it. Number 53, Kirby's Adventure. Now you might be thinking, okay, why is the original Kirby's Adventure this high? Doesn't the GBA remake outclass it in every way? Well, for one, I haven't played Nightmare in Dreamland, so I don't know. And two, even if it does, this still genuinely holds up by modern standards, and I'm not even kidding. This is my favorite NES game without question for how fun it remains even today. It's not the greatest game of all time or anything, but I'm really glad I finally played through it. It's just another reason why Kirby is so goddamn lovable. Number 52, Final Fantasy XV. Remember when I said at the beginning of the list that some of these games are going to be hard for me to look at because it's been so long since I played them? Well, Final Fantasy XV is this incarnate. This was actually in my top 10 favorite games of all time when I first beat it, but looking back, maybe I was just excited to have finally beaten it after 2 years. While 7 was the first Final Fantasy game that I actually played, this was the first one that I beat, so there could have been some biases. I have the PC version now though, as well as a PC that can actually run it, so maybe if I ever decide to go back to it one day, that's the version I'll try, but I can't say for sure when that'll be, because I'm a busy man. I'm going on road trips just like these fellas these days. Number 51, The Messenger. Classic Ninja Gaiden was something I've never really gotten into despite liking the Xbox reboot, so I probably wouldn't have played The Messenger if it wasn't for a friend recommending it to me, as well as it being connected to Sea of Stars just a little bit. But man, am I glad I did, because I never wanted to stop playing it. Amazing controls, graphics, music, a lighthearted and enjoyable story, this just has it all. It does have slower moments here and there that did make me feel a little bit fatigued, but I always pushed through no matter what, and I'm really glad I did. Another indie banger for sure. Number 50, Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. For a smaller scale side game of sorts, this is a pretty damn good one. It's definitely more of the same from the first game, a game I will get into later, without much of the way in terms of new stuff outside of abilities, and is much shorter, but the Insomniac Spider-Man games just work so well that it barely feels too derivative or bland in comparison to the first game, but it's definitely a side dish to supplement the other two main courses. Number 49, New Super Mario Bros. When I first beat New Super Mario Bros. U in 2018, I felt drained, spent, soulless. It was at the time the most I'd ever felt like I was truly forcing myself to finish a game. Hell, I didn't even feel that way with Sonic 06! Now, it could have been that I was just getting older and less tolerant of blandness and mediocrity, but whatever the case, not only did it give me fatigue from just video games in general for a short time, but it also made me hate the New Super Mario Bros. Games. Here's the thing though, until 2022, I hadn't played New Super Mario Bros. DS. I'd played all the other ones, but not that one for some reason, so I just kinda decided one day to try it out, and I loved it. It was a complete 180 from my previous mood of the games that had me fully invested even as a veteran of 2D platformers. There's genuinely a lot of value in a simple but well-designed one, turns out, and I'll definitely be keeping that in mind going forward. Number 48, Super Mario Maker 2. I'll just get this out of the way, Mario Maker 2 is nowhere near as special as 1 when it originally released. There are also things 1 does better, like easier level editing, amiibo costumes, and just small engine differences, but I think 2 adds so much in terms of new content that it balances out pretty well. It's still fun to find actually good levels and even be able to play them with friends now. In fact, I still go out of my way to find music levels that recreate songs I like. What can I say? I'm a simple man. Music I enjoy makes me happy, and so does a good Mario level. Number 47, Touhou Luna Nights. Confession time, this was technically my first Touhou game, but not really, because it's not an official one, but I played it before trying any of the actual Touhou games, and I'm glad I did play it at all, because now I'm into Touhou. Wow, who would have guessed? This is a rock-solid Metroidvania that never lets off the gas pedal throughout its roughly 5-hour length. It embodies wacky, arcadey action, and even some classic Touhou elements, like bullet hell patterns that you have to weave through. Plus, this game is why I love Sakuya Izayoi so much, with her awesome knives and time-stopping powers, and just overall badass energy. She's so cool. Number 46, Final Fantasy VIII. I really don't think I'll ever get the same experience with Final Fantasy VIII that I did when I first beat it ever again. Let me set the stage for you. It was spring 2020, pandemic had just begun, I had nothing better to do, so I decided to work my way through a game I started back in 2019, Final Fantasy VIII. It took me over a month and 2 complete file resets to beat. At one point, I made it all the way to the last few hours of the game, only to get stuck at the first boss of Disc 4, and then I just reset my save file. Beating this game was a battle. I had to learn every mechanic down to a T by the time I'd started the playthrough that I'd actually finished the game on. I don't even want to go into these mechanics right now because I'm actually planning on making my own review of Final Fantasy VIII somewhere down the line, like I mentioned earlier in the video. But there was just so much grinding. I mean, shit, by the time I was done, I had developed turn-based combat fatigue, and I just gave up at the first difficult boss of Final Fantasy IX when I started that game immediately after. Truly mastering this game like I did took a fuck ton of time and soul, something I had in spades back then, and something I greatly lack today as a miserable alcoholic college student. And that's why I might never love this game like I once did ever again. But you know what? I'll always have the memories, all the frustration, confusion, triumph, satisfaction. It all felt worth it. The story kind of feels like teenage fanfiction, but since I grew up reading a lot of fanfictions, I mean that in the most endearing way. Maybe the romance element wasn't the most effective, but it actually hit me harder than it probably would have normally because partway through one of my playthroughs, I experienced my first real heartbreak. I don't want to get sappy or anything like that, but it was without a doubt a turning point in my life, where my depression really kind of stemmed from initially, and in a sense, it felt like this game was there to help me through it. It was rough at times, but cathartic like other times. Every time I felt myself just hating this game with a burning passion because of all the frustrating elements of it, I'd end up finding more I was loving about it all. I'd fall down, but never got lost, never gave up. Always getting back on my feet and continuing to pursue the ending like a true lion-hearted warrior. I can't in good faith recommend Final Fantasy VIII to most, not even close, but you'll never hear me say that you shouldn't play it. Number 45, Fire Emblem Three Houses. I think I kind of shot myself in the foot going into Three Houses, if I'm being honest. I really expected it to be the best thing ever with how much praise it gets, and Fire Emblem was at the time my favorite game series. So naturally, I felt kinda underwhelmed with just how slow it felt to play. I really don't think the day-to-day life system is implemented as well as something like Personas, and the core gameplay just doesn't feel up to snuff with the best of the series. With that said, I still love a lot about Three Houses, even if it didn't live up to my lofty expectations. I appreciate how there's no right or wrong path instead of an obvious golden route where everyone is happy unless their name is Scarlet for some weird reason. I love the characters to death. Seriously, they did a fantastic job with this cast, and I'm grateful for the sales numbers it's brought in, even if it came at the cost of critics not knowing what the fuck a Fire Emblem actually is. Number 44, Super Mario Wonder. I wasn't expecting a return to 2D Mario to be this strong and creative. It's a lot like Donkey Kong Country, where every level has its own unique gimmick, and I love it. That said, I was in a pretty shitty headspace when I played this one, so I doubt I got the full enjoyment out of it. But even in spite of this, I'd actually probably consider it my favorite 2D Mario since World. Number 43, Halo Combat Evolved. Now, Halo 4 was actually the first Halo campaign that I beat by about 9 years, actually, but really, this may as well have been my first one. Halo 1 sure is old, but man is it gold. It's kind of shocking how much I enjoyed the campaign, actually. I was really expecting it to maybe feel too dated to be that enjoyable, but I'm so happy to be wrong. It definitely should not have taken me this long to beat it, but consider me a Halo fan now. I will definitely be going back and playing all the other campaigns soon. It's just too bad the slope gets a little slippery after Reach. Number 42, Cuphead. Cuphead is difficult, and I love it. This isn't going to be for everyone. It will kick your ass, no doubt, but in the best of ways. The challenge feels perfectly authentic and even encourages you to keep going. It actually took me a whole year just to beat the final boss, but when I did, it was one of my biggest pop-offs ever. And as a veteran platformer fan today, I can enjoy it even more now. And this is all without even finishing the DLC, which is absolutely great based on what I've played so far. And even if you're not the most experienced platformer fan, I'd still say it's worth at least trying. My sister doesn't even play video games that much, and she managed to beat the whole game mostly on her own. Not only way faster than I did at first, but with an A+ rank on the Devil, something I could certainly never hope to accomplish. Am I just bad at video games? I don't know, maybe I am. Number 41, Final Fantasy VII. I already made a whole video going over why I like this game so much, so if you want to hear more of my thoughts, just go watch that video. But if you don't want to, just know that in short, this game is an absolute classic for a good reason. It's not quite a masterpiece in my eyes, I do have some annoyances with it, but all in all, I'm so happy to finally beat this game 7.5 years after first trying it. Number 40, Panzer Dragoon. Here we are, the game that started what might be my favorite sorta underrated franchise. Panzer Dragoon has maybe aged a little, but if you ask me, it is timeless, perfectly capturing that arcade action Sega built their brand upon with challenging, unique, and ultra-satisfying gameplay. I don't even really mind the 1 to 2 hour length, since I could absolutely see myself replaying it. Add on a fun extras menu with cheat codes and secrets, and you've got the complete package. Of course, playing it today isn't super easy unless you own an Xbox or can wrangle Saturn emulation, so I guess the remake isn't a terrible alternative, but if you can, please play the original instead. Number 39, Ori and the Blind Forest. Ori is nothing short of beautiful. I have no complaints on a technical or story level when it comes to this game at all. And I think that kind of carries the game a little bit, if I'm being honest. The combat is straight up not good, and it does make the game feel a little repetitive at times, but it could also be seen as adding to the uniqueness of the game, because Ori is, without a doubt, one of the most unique Metroidvanias I've ever seen, maybe even more so than its sequel. That and said sequel are definitely must-plays in the genre for sure. A sequel that may show up later, might I add. Number 38, Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana is so painfully close to being a masterpiece if it had just been given a little more time. You look into what could have been with the PlayStation add-on for the Super Nintendo, and it's hard not to feel just a little bit robbed with the final product, and you better believe it's a crime the remake saw fit to recreate none of that lost content and remove any semblance of a soul from the game. Unforgivable. Fuck you, Square Enix. But in spite of all that, what we got was still a classic truly worth remembering. From the stellar OST to the beautiful art, they really made the most out of what they had and turned what otherwise would have been an 8 or a 7 out of 10 into a full 9. And while the gameplay can be a bit rough around the edges at times, I never felt it ruined too much. In fact, remember how I said Final Fantasy VIII gave me turn-based combat fatigue? Playing this right after was the perfect way to recover from that. And mind you, I was playing all this on single-player mode. I can't even begin to imagine how much fun it must be with 2 other players. Number 37, Streets of Rage 2. The 2D scrolling beat-em-up genre is one that I think could be just a bit difficult to get right for me. Most I find a tad boring or clunky, but Streets of Rage 2 is definitely not one of those. It's just a ton of fun, whether alone or with a friend like how I played. A shining example of the iron grip Sega held on arcade action back in the day. Number 36, Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. Metal Gear Solid 2 has to be the most impressive sequel ever. It's just the very definition of a leap forward in every way over its predecessor. On every single gameplay and technical front, I can't think of a single thing it does worse than the original. I mean, the ice cubes melt in real time for Kojima's sake. And while I might prefer the original game's story, this is also probably a leap forward in just sheer scope and insanity. And Raiden, how can you hate Raiden? He's awesome! I don't understand people who say he wasn't cool until Rising. Now, I actually know quite a few people whose favorite Metal Gear game is this one, and while I don't quite agree, I do respect that opinion quite a bit and see why many hold it. Number 35, Banjo-Kazooie. A real millennial game right here, if you will. I've actually been a fan of Banjo-Kazooie since, I want to say, about 2013 when I played it on one of my mom's friends' N64. However, I never actually got around to properly playing it until 2018 through Xbox Game Pass, and then our Game Pass subscription ran out right before the final boss. So, I cleaned up the following year, right before Banjo was added to Smash 2. The consensus? Yeah, it's still pretty great. I will come out right now and say that I think Mario 64 is better, since a lot of the late-game Banjo levels like Click Clock Woods could get annoying, but on the whole, this is just a really fun and cozy experience. I bet if I went back and played it now, I'd probably feel like a kid all over again. And while it is at least on Switch now, I'd still highly recommend the Xbox 360 version if you can, just like Sakurai suggested. Number 34, Bayonetta 3. Bayonetta 3 is really fucking stupid. The story is so bad. All of the charm the characters had in the last 2 games, especially Bayonetta herself, has been sucked dry, and you're left with these soulless husks just going through the motions. The ending in particular might be the worst ending I've ever seen in a video game, or at least the one that misses the point the hardest, and the gameplay is so scattered with so many random ideas just cobbled together, with some of them being outright bad. Viola's gameplay style in particular just feels off, and this game has no business trying to run on the Switch. It looks incredibly blurry and runs like garbage. Granted, they probably couldn't have overcome that last issue because of how outdated the Switch hardware, but that doesn't make it any less unfortunate. Now, with that all being said, Bayonetta 3 is pretty cool. The core gameplay remains as fun as ever, and they've even made some efforts to fix Viola's gameplay through patches. Demon puppeteering is honestly a pretty cool mechanic, especially when you unlock the follow-up technique. While I can't decide on my favorite soundtrack in the series, this is definitely a certified banger on par with the first 2. But overall, I think my favorite thing about Bayonetta 3 has to be how ambitious it feels. They clearly wanted to try something at least a little radically different from 1 and 2, and it definitely won't work for everyone. I mean, hell, one of my friends who loves the first 2 games absolutely hates this one, and that's perfectly fine. Risks were clearly taken, and whether or not they paid off is up for debate. But I think I'm satisfied with the 5-year wait we had for this game, and even if you despise it, can we at least agree it wasn't Platinum's worst of 2022? Number 33, Doom 2016. Ah, hell yeah, a first-person shooter I absolutely love! I will never claim to be a big fan of the FPS genre, it's just not what I grew up with, but I haven't encountered a single Doom game I haven't enjoyed yet. Granted, I've only played like 3, but that's still almost the entire series, not counting spin-offs, and boy do I love Doom 2016. So fast-paced, electric, gets your blood pumping, makes you want to fucking curb stomp anyone who gets in your way. Hands down, one of the best reboots in gaming, and I'm definitely going to be playing Eternal soon. Number 32, Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valencia. There was a time, for about half a year or so, when Echoes was tied with Fire Emblem Awakening for my third favorite game ever. It left such a strong positive impression on me that I never even wanted to stop and consider the fact that this game might actually have flaws, and that's the power of a strong presentation. You can have the most mechanically rich and well-designed game out there, but if you can't nail a single surface-level thing, you've already failed to captivate players. I let myself get sunk so deep into the story and characters and great music and support conversations and voice acting and animated cutscenes and other stuff, and it took me a while to realize, you know what? Maybe those swamp levels were actually kinda dog shit. Echoes coasts heavily off the things it and only it brings to the table compared to other Fire Emblem games, but that doesn't fully save it from the fact that it's just a bit too faithful as a remake. The map design?
It's not good.
And that sucks because it brings down what could have easily remained one of my favorite games of all time, but alas, it was not meant to be. So it's kind of a miracle it ranks this high still. I mean, I'd certainly kill to replay it again for the first time. Number 31, Persona 5. Oh, vanilla Persona 5 for the PlayStation 3, how I once loved thee, and I guess I still kinda do, just not as much. Much like Fire Emblem Echoes and Final Fantasy XV, this was one of my favorite games of all time when I first played it, without question. I tore through the whole thing in about 2 weeks flat and had the time of my life. It may have been one of my favorite playthroughs of any game, period, if I'm being honest. And yet, much like Final Fantasy XV and Echoes, this is a game I've grown increasingly less fond of as time passes. I think the presentation was just so phenomenal that it probably fooled me into thinking it was secretly a masterpiece. Part of me growing less fond of it could also have to do with the Persona community being kinda horrible back in 2019/2020, especially with anything related to 5. In addition, now that I've just played better RPGs, I don't have the same love for it. The final nail in the coffin, though, was Persona 5 Royal. A game I still have yet to beat, actually. But anyway, Persona 5 Royal is 100% a better version of the OG Persona 5 with so many improvements that range from minor quality of life adjustments to major gameplay overhauls. And yet, I know for a fact that I'm not enjoying it as much as I enjoyed my initial Persona 5 playthrough, despite it still being a phenomenal game. So where does that leave base Persona 5? I don't know, honestly. I think it would be disingenuous to rank P5 anything lower than a mid-A tier given how much I've loved it, though. It is one of the most important modern turn-based RPGs for a reason, after all, so I'm gonna let it stick around in the top half of the list. Also, I don't like Makoto very much, I'm sorry. Number 30, Star Fox 64 3D. A real classic that took me way longer than it should have to get around to playing. Star Fox 64 is a great representation of why I love rail shooters so much, if you couldn't already tell with Panzer Dragoon. Now, truth be told, I've actually only done one playthrough so far, but that probably has more to do with the shoulder buttons on my 3DS being on death's doorstep than how I actually enjoyed the game. Number 29, Persona 4 Golden. Remember how I said Persona 5 was a game that I grew less fond of over time after beating it? Well, Persona 4, specifically its shiny golden version, is the exact opposite, actually. I technically beat it on very easy in 2019 with the normal ending, and thought, yeah, that was good, but not as good as some make it out to be. Fast forward to 2020, though, where I decided to take a second crack at it. This time, seeking out far more enjoyment and content than before, not only going for the true ending, but also the new ending exclusive to Golden, and it was so worth it. I loved Persona 4 Golden so much in spite of any potential faults. The story and characters, the best of the trilogy of Persona games Atlus actually cares about. The music, absolutely jammin' stuff. The gameplay, remember when I said Final Fantasy VIII gave me turn-based combat fatigue? This game not only cured the turn-based part of it, but actually made me enjoy grinding. Of course, I do think this game has some flaws, homophobia. I don't think I quite loved it enough to bump it up to S tier, but I really only see my opinion on it going up actually, especially now that it's on console. Seriously, why did that take so long? Number 28, Yoshi's Woolly World. I slept on this game so hard for so long. I played it with my brother, but just didn't enjoy it that much. I thought it was boring, and yet another Yoshi game I just didn't feel like playing to completion. So imagine my surprise when I decided one day to just sit down and actually play it from start to finish, and actually loved it? The levels just felt so fun, both in platforming and in exploration. The art style is among my favorite of any game ever, and the music was great, especially for a Yoshi game. Oh god! really, this was just such a pleasant surprise and something I'm glad I gave a fair shot to, and I encourage others to stop sleeping on it. In fact, out of all the games from 2015 that I've actually played, this might be my favorite. Who would have thought? Number 27, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. How did it take Kirby this long to go 3D when they were sitting on this big a pile of gold? I can't even say this feels like what Mario 64 was to 2D Mario, since this just slots in so well with previous games. I guess it's a lot more like what 3D Land and World were to 2D Mario. Forgotten Land just works. Kirby really had the best transition to 3D imaginable. Take that, Sonic. Well, actually, I kind of like Adventure 1 and 2, so... Number 26, Marvel's Spider-Man. I'm not sure how I feel about Spider-Man basically being a large part of PlayStation's brand as opposed to actual PlayStation mascots, but when you look past all that, yeah, this game is pretty great. I grew up with Arkham City, so this isn't actually my first open-world superhero game, and playing this kinda has me want to revisit it at some point, but it's certainly got some steep competition now, even if I still overall prefer Batman as a character to Spider-Man just a little more. Right off the bat, I just want to say that the best thing about this game is just swinging around the city of New York at high speeds. It is so unbelievably fun that after beating the game, I found myself doing Spider-Man web shooting hand movement things in real life.
Why can't I shoot webs like Tobey Maguire?
When I'd rather manually travel to where I want to go instead of just fast traveling, that's how you know you've done an open world right. Really, this game was super close to making it into S tier, but I decided to hold it back just a little. I do think the game starts to peter off a bit toward the end, get it, Peter, with enemies that are more annoying to deal with and take longer to kill. I mean, dispatch, because
Spider-Man doesn't kill people.
And this isn't helped by the fact that I don't really like the combat. It's not bad, I just think it's missing a lot of the impact on most punches, something that could maybe be fixed with audio design tweaks and giving each punch more weight. This is not enough to ruin it, though, by any means, and you better believe as soon as I climb out of my crippling financial situation, I'll be playing Spider-Man 2, because, no, I actually haven't played it yet. Update really quickly, my brother actually bought the game right after Christmas, so thank you very much for that, brother. Number 25, Metroid Prime. When I first played Metroid Prime, I did not like it very much. The overabundance of backtracking, slow movement, repetitive enemy encounters, the doors needing a specific beam to open, I just hated it. I thought the game was good, but definitely not for me, and that's how it stayed for a while. Until last February. I have no idea how, but when I played Metroid Prime Remastered, everything changed. I can't even really tell you why. Was it the fact that the game got turned into one of the most jaw-droppingly gorgeous games, not just Switch games, but games in general that I'd ever seen? Did the new control scheme work to its benefit? Was I just in a better mind space because Metroid fans were finally eating good as fuck? Who knows, but hot damn did I have a great time. Some of my problems from before still persist since the remaster didn't actually change any gameplay elements outside of maybe one or two changes, but I just loved playing it and finally got the hype. And that's just the game itself. As a remaster, this is one of the best remasters ever made, almost no compromises, except the fusion suit, only upgrades here. It puts every other remaster from the last few years to shame. Oh, look at Sonic Colors Ultimate there with its overblown lighting and game-breaking bugs. Oh, Skyward Sword HD, Last of Us Part 1, and Red Dead Redemption want to join the club with those price tags? Yeah, right, Xenoblade well, actually, I think Xenoblade Definitive Edition is pretty good. Number 24, Nier Automata. Yeah, I can't put this one into words. Just go play it for yourself, please. Number 23, Metroid Fusion. Fusion is right at the very edge between being a masterpiece and just barely being shy of one. I think the slower pace brings it down just enough to be on the latter's side, but damn it, man, it's still just so good. I mean, how many other times can you say a GBA game made you feel tense and anxious? I actually don't mind the linearity that much, even in a Metroid game, since I think it was handled well enough, unlike a certain other game. And even if you don't like the gameplay, which I certainly like it, you can't deny the atmosphere and tone is 100% on point, maybe even the best in the whole series. I can absolutely see why people would consider this their favorite Metroid game, especially those who prefer Majora's Mask to Ocarina of Time. Can't say I'm among those people, but I respect the opinion regardless. And with that, we've reached the final tier, the S tier. A collection of masterpieces that do their job so well, it negates any real flaws they may or even may not have, starting with... Number 22, Street Fighter III Third Strike. If it wasn't clear from the Tekken 7 segment, I don't really take fighting games seriously, but that is not the case with Third Strike, a game I have had a ton of fun trying to become more skilled at. I have played so much of it with a friend over the past 2 years, and it is without a doubt my favorite traditional fighting game of all time, and as you'll soon find out, it's not far off from my favorite fighting game in general, and I'm still not even that great at it. I main Akuma, and he's kind of a crutch for me, at least for now. I have successfully pulled off the Shungoku Satsu one time, which my friend described as a deer in headlights situation for him. I don't know, maybe I'll get good enough to properly play Makoto though one day, who knows. Number 21, Streets of Rage 4. Yeah, we're not done with Streets of Rage yet. 4 takes everything that made the original so fun and cranks it up with some of the most fun combat I've seen in any video game, period. It is a blast taking on even the most basic of enemies. .emu just knows their shit clearly, and apparently the Ninja Turtles game they made is just as good, so you better believe that's on my to-do list at some point. Number 20, oh god, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This is going to be the hardest game to talk about in the S tier segment. You see, I'm on my college's Smash Bros. Esports team, despite not really taking the game seriously, and as I was writing this script, I hit a bit of a wall during one of the practice sessions. I realized I was no longer having fun with just the one-on-one matches. Ultimate, as it was to me now, was just no longer fun. So, I dug a bit deep into my mind, and tried to think why I once had this ranked as my fifth favorite game of all time. Was it hype? Probably, but I realized what my actual favorite part of it was all along, and this may shock you, but I think it was actually the single-player content. Sounds crazy, but I genuinely sunk so much time into just all the single-player elements of this game. I 100%ed World of Light, and I genuinely enjoyed it. Hell, I went out of my way to collect every spirit, song, challenge reward, you name it, and had a great time with it. I never had this much fun getting 100% completion on any video game ever, let alone a multiplayer game, but like, now that I have all that done and over with, what's really left for me? Is there any reason for me to continue playing with mechanics that grew stale for me by the time the last DLC had released? Why do I even like this game at all when my two most wanted characters ended up as assist trophies? I don't know how to feel about Smash Ultimate anymore. They say it gets worse for you the more you play it, and yeah, I'm starting to feel the fatigue, but why am I complaining so much if I have it ranked this high? Well, it's Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Why wouldn't I rank it this high? It's still one of the most content-packed, exciting games ever made, and I'll never let go of the great memories I had of it from the first reveal to as I'm speaking this very word. And hey, I actually picked up Ridley recently, and he's started to make the game more fun for me again. But still, can you guys please add Shadow as an Echo in the next game, or if Ultimate gets ported over? Assuming you fix Sonic's moveset, that shit is garbage and needs to be thrown in the trash right now. Okay, thank you, goodbye. Number 19, Celeste. Celeste is amazing. I love me a good difficult 2D platformer, and Celeste is absolutely that. I'm still trying to beat Chapter 9, actually. With gorgeous pixel art, a great soundtrack, fun levels to play through with tight controls, and so much replayability, this is a must-play for any platformer fan, and my second favorite game of 2018, just behind number 18, God of War. Okay, I know earlier I called Ragnarok God of War, so like, shouldn't I hate this game? Here's the thing. I really hate Sony's approach to limiting their brand only to realistic, Oscar-baity, third-person narrative-heavy walking sims, and Ratchet & Clank, of course. It was fine with The Last of Us 1, even if I'm not the biggest fan of that game. Kinda sick of it now, though, especially every time a new Game Awards rolls around, it feels like half the nominations go to these. To me, it devalues gaming as an art form, when people just say these are the biggest artistic achievements in gaming, when they're just interactive movies. But, at the same time, as an actual video game, I really like God of War 2018. I don't even care that much about the story. I mean, it's a good story. I love seeing the relationship between Kratos and his son develop over the course of the game through its many ups and downs. It feels like a real father-son bond. But it's not really one of my first picks for best story, just an overall simple yet really solid one with some great writing. No, I think it's just an incredible action-adventure game. It may not have the best combat ever, but I really struggle to think of much that this game does wrong. I can definitely say it looks phenomenal, at least. In fact, I spent like half an hour fiddling with the brightness settings just to make the HDR on the downstairs TV look just right when playing this on there. Because damn, does it look good with HDR. I should mention that I've yet to beat Ragnarok, and I'm not really sure if I'll enjoy it more or less. I think I'm still bitter about it winning Best Soundtrack, maybe. Number 17, Hollow Knight. I don't think Hollow Knight is the best Metroidvania ever, but I can see why some would think so. I mean, those bosses, man! For a while, this was actually my favorite Souls-like, even if we would rather not classify it as such. I mean, granted, it was the only Souls-like I'd put any significant amount of time into until I played a certain other game. But really, this is just such a huge slam dunk, especially as Team Cherry's first project. I mean, great bosses, great level design, top-tier visuals, atmosphere, and soundtrack, and a competent Metroidvania on top of that? Sure, not all of the bosses are winners, and many of the collectibles are straight-up dog shit, and it was just a tad annoying at points, but I really feel like I'd be down to play it again anytime, or at least finish up all the optional content. Never beating Absolute Radiance, though, fuck that. Number 16, Silent Hill 2. More than any other game on this list, if there was one I wish I could play again for the first time, it would be Silent Hill 2 without question. There is something so unique, so captivating, so haunting, so unforgettable about my first playthrough of Silent Hill 2. I don't play survival horror games, it's never been my genre of choice, but I can say that even if I play 100 different survival horror games, none will quite recapture the same feeling. Yeah, I'll get spooked, play it tensed up, anxiously awaiting the next jump scare, something I'm pretty sensitive to, but Silent Hill 2 is different. It manages to be the most chilling, unsettling, disturbing, and downright disgusting game I've ever played, all without a single real jump scare, and it didn't even need any to work as well as it did for me. I was so on edge playing this that just seeing the cutscene that introduces Pyramid Head startled me. I now love him, by the way, absolutely better than Mr. X and Nemesis. I mean, for Christ's sake, a tiny bit of fog literally formed on my street as I approached the final boss. If that's not the most fear-inducing thing ever, I don't know what is. Now, I will admit that Silent Hill 2 isn't the most exciting game to play by any means. The gameplay loop is fairly slow and even a bit monotonous, plus the camera can be kinda screwy at times. The thing is though, I never felt like those things detracted from the experience. In fact, I kinda think it works to the game's benefit in further immersing you. Excluding a few real-world circumstances that could have been avoided, I never really felt like my immersion was broken throughout my playthrough, not even with the stilted English dub acting. Which leads me to the thing that really ties it all together. The narrative, both with the actual story and the environmental storytelling. It's just so good. Like I said, I can't really rank it much higher since I get more enjoyment out of the games above, but as an experience, this is near the very top. Please, Konami, do not fuck up the remake or DMCA the Enhanced Edition, I am begging you. Number 15, Hi-Fi Rush. This was actually the last game on the list I beat, and man did I end it on a high note. Yeah, get it? Yeah, whatever. This is such a wildly cool concept for a game that alone would propel it pretty high on the list, but nah man, they also went a step further and crafted a genuinely phenomenal action game around these mechanics. One with a perfect artistic and tonal style, with the most literally me protagonist ever made. I fucking love Chai, he is absolutely me. My only real complaint is that, much like any action game of this type, it may start to get a little repetitive and play too long, and I think it's just a little bit too easy, at least on normal mode. So while Bayonetta 2 might still be my favorite hack and slash or character action game, this is still a banger with a fittingly banging soundtrack too. Number 14, Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is just such a rock-solid game through and through, or at least the most consistently good I've ever played. And you probably love it, or at least the newly released remake too. I should mention, by the way, that I haven't finished the remake yet, and while it is very much on par with the original, I think I still kind of prefer the OG just a little more, tank controls and all. I mean, this game makes escort missions fun, for God's sake. How are you not playing it again for like the 10th time right now? And if you haven't played it once, what are you waiting for? At least try the remake if you're really stubborn about the controls. Now, I don't think it's a perfect game, since I think it goes on just a tad too long, but it more than earns its reputation as one of the best games ever made. Number 13, Xenoblade Chronicles. I'm gonna be real with y'all, I still don't fully understand this game's mechanics and combat, but that's okay because I just let the experience move me, and Xenoblade Chronicles is one hell of an experience. Now, fans of Xenoblade have hyped up this game and the series in general as being one of the best things ever made, and it's also led to many being a little overprotective of the series, unable to accept anyone slandering, or even just being a little vocal about disliking the game. But I mean, shit, that's just what happens when some people get passionate about things they love that are niche. And it isn't like this doesn't happen in other fandoms. Xenoblade is just an easy target because, I don't know, Donkey and Pyra and Mithra and Smash, I guess. Oh right, Xenoblade is a game. Yeah, I love it. It's just such an excellent time from start to finish with only a few sour spots. A great satisfying challenge with a unique battle system, memorable characters, and a narrative that, while not presented the best in terms of writing, is undeniably unforgettable, with an equally memorable setting containing beautifully crafted environments that blend nature and technology. The music? You could honestly just classify the entire Xenoblade series as my favorite soundtrack in all of gaming. I didn't always get the hype for this game, though. I actually first played it in 2015 with the new 3DS port when I was 13. I did not understand the combat at all, found the game excruciatingly difficult, and only made it about as far as the halfway point, I want to say. In 2021, though, I picked up the Definitive Edition, and everything just clicked. So yeah, I really love Xenoblade 1. With the release of 3, this one tends to get the least amount of attention online these days. Many are frantically worrying over the future of X, 2 is locked in an endless cycle of toxic debate, and 3 is too busy getting sucked off as hard as possible. But this is the first and currently only Xenoblade game that I've beaten, so you know what? I'll always love it the most. Until I beat 3, because based on what I've played of that game, it might legitimately be the best RPG ever made. Number 12, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now, this is kind of a weird one, because I have played and loved Mario Kart 8 for almost a decade now. However, that's the base Mario Kart 8 for the Wii U. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for the Switch just wrapped up its DLC, adding 48 more courses to the game, from unexpected picks to fan favorites to exciting new courses. I was gonna rank this at first solely based on the booster course pass as a whole, and it definitely would go down quite a few slots if that were the case, owing in part to some, very questionable picks like, Toad Circuit, as well as some being butchered graphically and mechanically even. But you know what? Forget all that. How about we just rank Mario Kart 8 Deluxe as a complete package now, because I'd say that's more fun. Not only did I actually finish all the Grand Prix this year, but I also finally fell in love with the game. I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved 8 before, but I didn't consider it a masterpiece until last summer. My sister was over for a month, and she wanted to practice the game with me before heading home, and I never wanted to stop playing throughout that entire month. I looked forward every day to playing against her and truly getting the most out of this phenomenal game. And now that it has some of my favorite tracks from previous games like Calamari Desert, DK Mountain, Waluigi Pinball, Mushroom Gorge, Maple Treeway, Coconut Mall, Peach Gardens, Waluigi Stadium, Moonview Highway, Wii Rainbow Road, fuck man, 7 Rainbow Road, which happens to be my favorite course in the entire series, that's all the more reason to love it more. The booster course pass, like I said, was not perfect. The first wave was rough graphically, and in terms of picks as well, but the later waves definitely cleaned it up. The real surprise of it for me, though, were the tour tracks. I was kinda disappointed when I learned that these would take up slots in the track selection, but I naturally grew to enjoy them and the unique flares they brought to the table. And yeah, that includes the city tracks. Not all of them are bangers, but I really don't mind playing on most of them. You know, I never thought I'd love Mario Kart 8 more than Smash Ultimate at some point, but here we are. What a crazy timeline, huh? Number 11, Final Fantasy VI. Yeah, call me old-fashioned, but my favorite Final Fantasy has gotta be 6. There's just no doubt about it. It's got the best characters, without question. I don't dislike a single one of the 14 playable characters. My favorite, though, has to be Terra, who is now in my top 3 favorite game characters of all time, but even the non-playable ones are great. In fact, you can absolutely still make a case for Kefka being the face of this game even more than any of the main characters. He's probably still the best villain in the series in terms of actually being a villain, too. And the story, it just works. Even the second half, which slows the pace down to build up to a more triumphant finale, serves its purpose really well. The finale, oh my god, this has to be my favorite final boss in a turn-based RPG with the best final boss theme of all time. The music, too! I played the Pixel Remaster version for my first full playthrough, and they somehow crushed it so hard that it actually makes the original original music seemed like it was holding back in a sense. And that's not even getting into the gameplay too, with the Magicite system and everything. I think the game is pretty damn great across the board, outside of a few areas that I outright dislike. Of course, it's not perfect. The Cultist Tower can burn in hell, and I still dislike random encounters, but Final Fantasy VI is just unforgettable and deserving of its legendary reputation.
I'm gonna win Final. I'm gonna be Final Fantasy. What do you mean he can cast Meteor? Why can he cast Meteor? Why is he capable of casting Meteor? I did it! I won! I'm trying to keep my family asleep, but oh my god! I won! Oh my god! Oh, that was the greatest final boss I've ever faced in gaming.
Number 10, Ori and the Will of the Wisps. This is how you do a sequel, an improvement on almost everything the first game struggled at, especially combat. We even now have proper bosses as a result of it. It even manages to crank up the things the original had going for it, like level design, environment design, visuals, ability, spectacle. Fuck, it's just so great. I played it around the week of release on Game Pass and felt nothing but true satisfaction through it all. It's just too bad the weeks, months, years that followed it weren't as great. Real quick though, before I move on, I gotta scold y'all. I know 2020 had some big releases, especially in spring, but how could you let 2020's obvious game of the year, no not you, just slip under the rug like that? This game got so overlooked, and I will never forgive that grave sin. Ori fans, we can't let Moon Studios' next game get shafted like this. Number 9, another Metroid 2 remake. AM2R is my favorite fan game of all time, and it's not particularly close. Hell, excluding Sonic Mania, it may just be my favorite fan-made thing, full stop. 10 years of love, made almost entirely by one man, to celebrate one of the greatest gaming franchises of all time, and it stands tall with the best of the best. At one point, it was genuinely my favorite Metroid game ever, and still remains in my top 5. It's just a damn shame that it had to be a fan game based on a series owned by a very rigid company. I mean, look, I love Nintendo's games, I really do, but damn, they just seem so cold-blooded sometimes. But there is a happy ending to it all, at least. Guess what game studio offered the creator of the game a job as a level designer after AM2R's release? Moon Studio, the creators of the Ori series. Funny how things work out, you know? Number 8, Resident Evil 2 Remake. Both my first Resident Evil game and my favorite Resident Evil game. Yes, I know I should play the original version of 2 as well as 1 and 3, but there'll be plenty of time for that, assuming our own world isn't hit with a zombie outbreak. Prior to playing this game, I didn't really consume much survival horror content, probably none at all if you don't count FNAF, but I sure am a fan now. Unlike Resident Evil 4, which felt pretty great to play but not super scary, or Silent Hill 2, which is probably the scariest game I've ever played, but not the actual best in terms of gameplay, this one manages both pretty well. It had me anxiously awaiting the next spook and loving all the puzzles and combat. Mr. X in particular, while occasionally annoying, did absolutely keep me on my toes. You never know when this motherfucker will just show up, but when you finally defeat him at the end, it is so satisfying. Easily my game of the year for 2019, and it's not close. Or at least not until I play DMC5. Number 7, Metroid Zero Mission. I didn't intend for there to be 3 remakes in a row, but here we are, I guess. Now this was the game that got me into Metroid. Now, it wasn't actually my first one. I had beaten Super Metroid as far back as 2018 and Metroid 1 a few months prior, and while Super remains in my top 10 favorite games of all time, I didn't fully appreciate it until after getting into Metroid 1. And yeah, so this was the one. Makes sense, since it's kind of a perfect jumping in point for the series. And I'm happy to say that it's probably my favorite remake of all time still. How they took a janky, boring NES game and turned it into near perfection is beyond me. But they did it! They made the impossible possible, and you better believe I'm down to replay it any day of the week. Alright, number 6, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Okay, remember my initial review of this game from back in June? If I had made this list back then, it would have been number 1 by default. I mean, it's a more content-packed version of my favorite game of all time. How could I possibly not rank it as high or higher than Breath of the Wild? Well, I took a bit of time after playing it to more thoroughly evaluate my thoughts and distinguish what was just hype and what was genuine enjoyment, and I'm gonna be honest, I still prefer Breath of the Wild. Here's the thing though, I played Breath of the Wild under the best possible conditions. I was 15, it was summer break, and I put almost 200 hours into it into a single month. I loved every second of it, I got fully immersed in the world and sought out every corner of it, and I never wanted it to end. Fast forward to now, I'm 21, I see a lot less value in an individual game due to owning many more. I find it impossible to dedicate a massive amount of time to just one game, as opposed to a moderate amount of time to many games. Only somewhat explored most of the overworld, mostly just to see what changed, and on top of it all, found it much less immersive due to feeling like the game was just insanely bloated and packed full with almost too many things. This is Nintendo's biggest game without question, I think, and I think I just felt too overwhelmed by it all. I'm sure that if I had played this around the same time I played Breath of the Wild, I wouldn't have had a single complaint, but time has taken its toll on me, and it's only been 6 years, what the fuck? With that being said, the game is still ranked this high for a reason. There's a reason I spent 5 days straight playing this game with no urge to do anything else, something that rarely happens to me even with some of my favorite games of all time. I don't get sunken into a game this easily very much, so it's clear that they did something right, and while I don't like it more than Breath of the Wild, it undoubtedly has improvements over it. The music is more varied, the dungeons are more interesting, the bosses are definitely better. The final boss in particular is my favorite of any Zelda game now. Really, I can't bring myself not to love Tears of the Kingdom. Rarely does the game hook me as hard as this, leaving me with no desire to play anything else, and you know what? If we were ranking this based on what games made me the happiest, this would probably be tied with number 1, and isn't happiness what matters most to the individual? Number 5, Elden Ring. This is a huge surprise to me. I did not expect to love Elden Ring as much as I did, at all. I had tried plenty of Soulsborns before, from Dark Souls 1 to Bloodborne to Sekiro, but I'd always fall off before reaching the 10 or even 1 hour mark. The only exception was, I guess, Hollow Knight, but does that really count since it's 2D and such? And it seemed like I wouldn't get as much out of Elden Ring either for a while. I explored as much as I could out of the overworld, constantly running into roadblock after roadblock, appreciating the game for what it was as I went along, but never being able to enjoy it as much as others. Then something changed. Specifically, a few days after it took home not just Game of the Year, but the weirdest internet story of the week.
Bill Clinton.
I decided to try playing it in a different way, finding a different weapon, actually upgrading it, not just playing in the most basic way imaginable, and the weapon I found helped me tear my way to the finish line, with a little help from summons in the endgame anyway. I was in love instantly. I just could not stop playing and exploring everything. Even after beating it, I went back and did a New Game Plus playthrough, making it to the final boss in just a day, and I'm still nowhere near close to being done exploring it all, even without the upcoming DLC. I really feel like this is a game I could play for years on end, maybe even a decade, and still not see everything there is to offer, and maybe even still enjoy it all by the time I'm done. I mean, you can argue that there are balancing issues, but none of it hampered my enjoyment. The best thing I can say about this game, though, is that it made me a proper fan of the Souls series. I've already restarted Dark Souls 1 and Sekiro, and I love both so far, and the others aren't too far behind. So, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you FromSoft and Miyazaki for what may be the best set of games of the last 12 years. Number 4, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. When I first played Symphony of the Night, something felt off to me. I had high expectations and they weren't exactly met. I decided within an hour that I simply preferred classic Castlevania to the Metroidvania style. A couple months later though, I decided to pick it back up and things started to click a little bit more. I did still have a few annoyances, especially with the inverted castle half of the game, but it was definitely a turnaround from my first impressions. But even after beating it once, I didn't feel like that was enough. So I went back and did another playthrough. This time, things really clicked into place, with none of my initial annoyances seemingly bothering me this time. Then I did another playthrough, this time as Richter, which, while an inferior way to play without a doubt, it was still an interesting and fun way to experience the game. Finally, I did one last playthrough that fall, this time using a glitch to keep all my starting equipment, and by the time I beat that playthrough, I knew this was one of my favorite games of all time without question. Symphony of the Night is my favorite example of the power replayability can have on a game, so much so that I actually make an active effort to replay it every October and have yet to miss any years. Even more impressively, it never gets worse for me each time. It's such a strong game at its core that even after 8 playthroughs, I still love it, and that's not even getting into why I love it so much, such as the music, the fluid controls, the top-tier level design, bosses, visuals, atmosphere. For a brief time, this was the king of Metroidvanias for me, the best of the best, even over Super Metroid, and while I do prefer Super now, Symphony ain't far behind. Now, if only I could just sit down and play the other Castlevania Metroidvanias. Number 3, Chrono Trigger. I spent $75 on the DS port of this, and I regret nothing. I could just end the conversation right there, but let's continue. If we were to try and theorize what game is truly the closest to perfection, which one nails as many things across the board as possible, my answer would not actually be what I consider to be the objective best game of all time, Ocarina of Time. No, it would be Chrono Trigger. There is truly nothing egregiously wrong about Chrono Trigger. It's as perfectly balanced as balance can be in pretty much every respect. Yeah, sure, we have newer, fancier RPGs today, but Chrono Trigger might still be the magnum opus of not just Square, but RPGs as a whole. I mean, think about it. What other JRPG has a cast of characters where every member is useful and worth having in your party at any time? Not many, I'm sure. What other RPG requires little to no grinding with tough situations that can usually be overcome by mixing up your team composition? Maybe a few, but not a whole heck of a lot. How many RPGs have a combat system that manages to be both simple and easy to understand, and insanely depthful and fun from start to finish without ever feeling repetitive? Narrowing it down a bit, for sure. How many RPGs have phenomenal writing, music, story, characters, with multiple endings and decisions that actually make a difference? Even if you can think of a few there, let me ask, how many meet all of the conditions I just listed with no exceptions? If you can think of such a game, let me know what game you're thinking of so I can try it for myself. But yeah, Chrono Trigger is absolutely worth every bit of praise and hype it still receives today. Yet, there are still 2 games on here I just so happen to prefer a little bit more. Number 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. Snake Eater is emotional, as in, it will make you feel every emotion. From the moment you touch down from the Halo jump to the moment you hear the final bit of dialogue, Naked Snake's journey through Soviet Russia is a journey you'll never forget. One crafted by a development team at their peak. And I know a few of you might think, oh wow, another guy who ranks 3 as the best Metal Gear game, how original. But like, there's a reason we all love it. A reason we feel the weight of every moment, every gameplay set piece or story beat. It's all wrapped up in one of the most artistically stunning pieces of media and gaming. Mechanics that feel like they have endless depth, bosses that can be seemingly handled in many different ways, a tightly woven gameplay loop that keeps itself consistently great from start to finish. No, the healing system isn't that bad. A heartbreaking story about how the events around you can often change you as a person and the actions you must take, capped off with, to this day, the single best ending I've ever experienced in any video game to date. It's a masterpiece on every front, and I sure hope Konami doesn't fuck it up. By all accounts, this should be the number 1 pick, and it probably deserves to be, but I'm just gonna be honest here for a moment. I tried to factor any bias out of this ranking on my attachment to a specific series, and you know what? I almost succeeded, but I don't think I can rank this next game as anything other than number 1. Tears of the Kingdom certainly came close to overthrowing it before I let the hype wear off, but as of now, nothing touches it, and that's because Metroid Dread feels like it was made for me and only me. From the moment it was revealed, it truly felt like Nintendo called out to me and said, "Here, this is for you. I still vividly remember how sweaty I was after the reveal. I hadn't been that excited for a game since at least Smash Ultimate, so I pretty much had impossibly high expectations from minute one, even with Mercury Steam's inconsistent output. And yet, it lived up to pretty much all of my expectations, except the music. That aspect is kind of weak. But if we ignore that, then yeah, this is it. The game that was truly made for me. A fast-paced, action-driven Metroidvania that ticks every box. And this isn't just recency bias or hype clouding my judgment. I went back and replayed it last August on hard mode and it's still just as amazing. Nothing has changed with time. The controls are still just as fluid. The world feels perfectly crafted. The challenge is brutal, yet still satisfying. The bosses are still so unbelievably top tier. In fact, let me just say, this has my favorite final boss of all time. Eat your heart out, Ganondorf, Radiance, the boss, Senator Armstrong, Kefka, Jubileus, until I eventually beat Sekiro. Ravenbeak is my GOAT. Oh, and they actually let you sequence break and acknowledge it because you can do stuff like get bombs early and quick kill Kraden. I love this game so much! It just makes me so happy that it even exists. Maybe I am biased, but I don't even care. I'm not even trying to structure this segment. I'm just letting my train of thought run wild because I can barely articulate my true thoughts with this one. Fuck, this game shouldn't even exist. When I got into Metroid, I truly never expected the next game to be a cancelled DS 2D Metroid given a second chance. I know not everyone cared for this entry, and that's okay. It may have some issues and might not fully recapture the essence of the other 2D Metroids, but I urge you to try this one at least once. Without a doubt, my favorite game I played for the first time in the last 5 years, and currently my 5th favorite game of all time. I can't think of a better game to end this list on. Well, that's the end of the video, I guess. I really have no idea what I was thinking when I said I'd have it done by New Year's Eve. I mean, if I wanted to do that, I really should have started editing it like the moment that I beat Hi-Fi Rush. I mean, just recording it took a while, but editing took me multiple days and nights, so I'm kind of proud of myself, though, in a way. This is kind of a bit of an unscripted segment where I just sort of share my thoughts on the ranking as a whole, and how it's sort of affected me personally in the way I play video games and whatnot. I will say, I don't regret doing it at all. I'm glad that I had this to show for my own experience with gaming and how I view games and whatnot, but at the same time, I kind of feel like it's impacted the way I play games in sometimes a negative way. Take Nier Replicant, for example. I probably would have gone out of my way to get every ending had I played the game, maybe just like, give or take 2 or 3 years prior to when I played it. And that's not to say that how I've played has just completely changed in general, but I did mention before that I see a lot less value in an individual game, and that's unfortunately become more and more the case now that I've started college and everything. With that being said, I do really want to make an active effort to fix this. So I think starting next year, I'm really going to start to focus more on individual games rather than trying to beat as many as possible. I mean, sure, there's about 10 that I would like to beat before the end of the year. And I would like to knock out more of my backlog, but I really feel like if I want to knock out my backlog for real though, I have to enjoy it at the same time. I can't ever feel obligated to play a video game, because video games should never be an obligation. It should just be something you do just to chill for a bit in between, I don't know, working your shitty 9-to-5 shift. Unless you're a Twitch streamer, in which case I guess you're just fucked. But me personally, I play video games because I love them, and they bring me a lot of joy. And I don't want that to change at all. Hence why I didn't actually have very many bad games in this video. I don't really go out of my way to play bad games to completion. With that being said though, I have something very important that I need to say. I've been struggling a lot with self-worth as of late. It's become more and more difficult to see value in myself as a person. I've constantly felt inferior to others in a way that makes me feel the need to compare myself to everyone around me, or at least those that seem superior to me, when that's not how I should be living my life. I really do want to change a lot going into this year, and you know what? I do have a good feeling about 2024. The last few years have been unapologetically pretty shitty, but I really do want things to change for the better. I mean, who knows, maybe things will get worse, but you know what? I'm optimistic right now. I do think that there is a chance. So that kind of brings me to one thing I want to say to just wrap this whole video up. And that's to once again thank you so much for watching this. The fact that at least one person went out of their way to watch to the very end truly means a lot to me, and I'm not saying that it's gonna boost my ego or anything, but it genuinely makes me feel like I'm actually putting something positive out into the world, at least leaving some kind of an impact, giving myself at least a little bit of worth. So I think I'm definitely going to continue making videos throughout 2024. I can't say how many because, I don't know, procrastination is, it's a nightmare, ADHD and all, but I can definitely say look out for more videos to come. I have my next one planned right now, actually. Can't really make any promises in case I end up scrapping it, but I'd say be on the lookout for that, for sure. With that all being said, though, once again, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching, and as always, have yourselves a good rest of your day, and take care.